Imagine a civilization that rose on the fertile banks of the Nile, where the sun patiently scorched the earth for thousands of years. A civilization that was as constant and unchanging as the flow of the historical river itself. Under the absolute hegemony of Mat, or divine order, every pharaoh was the lawful and sacred heir of those who came before him. Yet no organization, no political power, was as deeply rooted and unshakable as the cult of Amun, which represented the absolute power of the priestly class in ancient Egypt. Until the 14th century BC, when that obsessive and radical ruler of the 18th dynasty ascended the throne. He attempted to rule Egypt not only with his armies, but also by changing the names of the gods and creating a terror of ideas. He changed his name to He Who Is Profitable to the Aten. He closed the temples of the old gods, destroyed their statues, and cursed their names. He abandoned the capital of Thebes and built a city from scratch in the desert. Art, religion, politics. He attempted to radically change everything, imposing his own intellectual utopia. This is not just the story of a pharaoh. This is the saga of history's first known monotheistic revolutionary, a radical reformer who challenged a thousand-year-old belief system, and how the changes he wrought brought a curse upon his own dynasty. He was the most mysterious, the most controversial, and perhaps the loneliest ruler of ancient Egypt. He was Akhenaten, father of Tutankhamun and husband of Nefertiti, who was legendary for her beauty. So why would a pharaoh curse his own gods? What lengths did he go to forcibly change a nation's faith? And why were the shadows of this cursed revolution attempted to be erased from Egypt's memory for hundreds of years? This video is not just the anatomy of a religious revolution, but a shattering examination of how a leader's fanaticism can plunge an empire into chaos. We invite you on a journey full of secrets, destruction, and terrifying transformation, stretching from the shadows of Thebes to the sun-drenched deserts of Akhetaten. The 14th century BC, when Akhenaten ascended the throne, was struggling with a state of parallel power, much like the Russian Tsardom at the beginning of the 20th century. The pharaoh was traditionally the god on earth, yet even this divinity remained overshadowed by the financial and political might of the Amun-Ra priests. The Egyptian capital of Thebes, Karnak, was the center of the Amun-Ra cult. The immense wealth gained by the new kingdom through wars and conquests was largely concentrated in the hands of these priests. Temple lands, slaves, gold, and taxes. The Amun cult had turned into a state within a state, establishing an economic and ideological hegemony. Pharaohs had to pay their debt of gratitude to Amun for winning wars, and this increased the power of the priests daily. Amenhotep IV, a young ruler whose name meant Amun is pleased, grew up in rebellion against this oppressive structure. Deep within his soul lay a profound dissatisfaction with his shadow government and an intense desire to absolutely centralize power. Historians suggest that Amenhotep's radical determination may have also been fueled by a psychological alienation stemming from his physical differences, perhaps a genetic condition, which left him with an elongated jaw and unusual body contours, distinct from the traditional pharaonic aesthetic. He was an outsider to the system of traditional gods, and he was determined to dismantle it. Amenhotep experienced a period of silence during the first 5 years of his reign, but this was the quiet preparation for an ideological coup. His plan would be executed with the ruthlessness of the KGB in eliminating dissidents, but under a religious disguise. The religious revolution was not merely a change in theological belief, it was an operation to reclaim power. Amenhotep declared Aten, the sun disk, as the single, universal, visible, and concrete god. While Aten was a minor deity in the old hierarchy, it was now the sole source of the universe. The genius and ruthlessness of this move lay in eliminating the intermediary. If Aten was the only god, and the pharaoh was Aten's only son and direct representative on earth, there was no longer any need for the Amun priests, temples, and countless idols. Their wealth and political influence were instantly nullified. This was the greatest political and financial transfer in Egyptian history. The peak of the terror was Amenhotep's transformation of his own name to Akhenaten, he who is profitable to the Aten, followed by a systematic erasure operation. Just as the Soviets erased their enemies from the pages of history, Akhenaten began to have the name of Amun chiseled out from every corner of Egypt. The assigned sculptors and workers were eradicating the name and image of Amun from the stone and rock of thousands of years old monuments, temples, and sarcophagi. According to ancient Egyptian belief, the erasure of a name meant the annihilation of a person's existence in the afterlife. Akhenaten was applying an ideological terror, threatening not only the faith, but also the eternal hope of believers. This cruelty cemented the fanatical nature and authority of the new regime. Akhenaten abandoned Thebes, the old capital where the accursed shadow of Amun fell. He built a capital from scratch in the desert, on untouched land where no one could contaminate his ideas. Akhetaten, meaning horizon of the Aten. This city was the physical manifestation of his radical utopia. The temples in Akhetaten, unlike traditional Egyptian architecture, were roofless and open. Worship was conducted directly under the sun. This was again an ideological move. Aten belonged to everyone, and there was no need for the mysterious darkness created by the priestly class. Everyone saw the sun, and everyone could reach God simultaneously. This was another form of supervision, because worship was no longer secret, but public, and under the absolute control of the pharaoh. Akhenaten, along with Nefertiti, was the sole representative of Aten on earth. The new style, known as Amarna Art, shattered the rigid, idealized rules of traditional Egyptian art. In the statues, the pharaoh and his family were depicted in a naturalistic, realistic, even grotesque manner. The pharaoh's elongated jaw, thin arms, and rounded belly were exaggerated. This realist revolution demonstrated Akhenaten's obsession with the concept of truth in place of ma'at. But for the populace, this was a distorted depiction of the sacred and the established order. For them, this aesthetic chaos was proof that the pharaoh was mad and was disturbing the cosmic order. Much like the Stasi declaring dissidents mentally ill, Akhenaten was imposing his own reality, disregarding artistic norms and deepening the gulf between himself and the people. Akhenaten's entire energy, much like an ideological leader focusing on internal enemies, was directed towards internal reform and religious obsession. This intense introspection led to the disastrous neglect of Egypt's foreign policy and the security of the empire. Egypt's vassal states and allies were under attack from enemies coming from Anatolia and the Levant. However, Akhenaten was so focused on the new order being established in Akhetaten that he ignored the real threats outside. The Amarna letters are the most painful evidence of this neglect. Vassal kings were desperately pleading with the pharaoh for help, soldiers, and supplies. Desperate phrases like, "The enemies are taking our lands," and "Our king, why do you not help us?" showed just how disconnected Akhenaten was from pragmatic political reality. His priority was not to protect the empire, but to transform it. This religious fanaticism led to a major political disaster. Egypt's external power and prestige rapidly declined. The empire was becoming the victim of a fanatical pharaoh's personal utopia. Akhenaten could ban Amun, but he could not tear out thousands of years of habits and beliefs from the hearts of the people. Ordinary Egyptians continued to worship small idols of the old gods behind the walls of their homes. Much like people secretly practicing their religions in the Soviet Union, the Egyptian populace formed a secret resistance front. For them, Akhenaten was not just a heretic, but a figure of chaos who had broken Ma'at, cosmic order. Akhenaten, in the 17th year of his reign, suddenly and mysteriously withdrew from history, much like his rise. With his death, the Atenism utopia he created evaporated like a mirage quickly lost in the desert. But the real fear was the revenge that followed this collapse. Akhenaten's young successor, likely his son, immediately changed his name from Tutankhamun, living image of the Aten, to Tutankhamun, living image of Amun. This name change was the official declaration that the power of the Amun priest had returned and the counter-revolution had begun. The capital, Akhetaten, was abandoned, monuments were dismantled, and Thebes once again became the center of Amun. This return, like the people seizing the files after the collapse of the Stasi, was an ideological cleansing. The priests not only re-established the old order, but also sought to destroy everything that remained of Akhenaten. The priest's revenge continued long after Akhenaten's death, turning into a Damnatio Memoriae, condemnation of memory campaign. The names of Akhenaten and Nefertiti were chiseled out from all monuments, their statues were smashed, and they were completely removed from written records. In official records, he was thereafter referred to only as the criminal or the enemy. This was one of the greatest punishments determining a pharaoh's fate. Akhenaten was cursed by his own people, and attempts were made to erase him from Egypt's collective memory. It was as if he had never existed. He was considered an error of history. This is the most striking proof that a leader's fanaticism cost not only his life, but also his historical existence. Akhenaten's cursed revolution remained secret for about 3,000 years. However, modern archaeological discoveries in the 20th century brought this most radical pharaoh of Egypt back into the light. The story of Akhenaten is still at the center of a major debate today. Did his Atenism sow the first seeds of the Abrahamic monotheistic religions that emerged much later? Is the pharaoh's concept of a single god and universal God the first, subconscious source of belief systems ranging from Judaism to Christianity? This makes Akhenaten not just a pharaoh, but a seed of an idea that changed the course of history. Egypt's effort to erase Akhenaten from memory proves the magnitude of the trauma he created. He is not an example of what an ideology sacrifices to survive. Rather, he is an example of how ideological fanaticism sacrifices an entire state. They did not only fight foreign enemies, they fought gods and ancestors. Akhenaten was defeated as a pharaoh and cursed, but the idea he put forth transcended the boundaries of the Egyptian deserts. His story was the soul of an era, a dark prophecy demonstrating how the ambition for absolute power and religious fanaticism could internally rot even the most ancient empires. And the shadows of that prophecy are still felt today in theology and history books. We hope that in this video, you had the opportunity to examine in detail the radical revolution, psychological fanaticism, and cursed legacy of Pharaoh Akhenaten, who overturned thousands of years of order. You can find the sources we used to prepare the video in the description. Your support is very important for more great content to come. Please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel. See you in the next video. Take care.